So in the university system, you have math, you have whatever the subject areas may happen to be, you have philosophy, but then you also have a parallel architecture that's been set up in which insert word studies is set up, gender studies. And so gender studies isn't merely the study of gender, it's the study of gender. And these fields, and that's really among the most generous thing one could say about them, these fields operate by their own rules. They have their own methodologies. They have their own ways that they advance. So, for example, one thing that they use is lived experience. In the literature, it's called standpoint epistemology. So we all have our own lived experience, and we need to, a word they're very fond of, privilege certain sorts of life experiences. So I can never, as a cis white heterosexual male, experience or have access to the lived experience of somebody who has more oppression variables than I have. So to understand that, we need a field of study, critical race theory, critical studies, which is it's interesting, by the way, at Portland State University, there was an event in which white people could attend but couldn't ask questions. So it was a listening event. and
what could possibly go wrong with telling people to shut up based on their skin color?
First of all, I was amazed that was legal at a public institution. So a long story short, I found out that it was legal, but it was inadvisable, because if you do that, then you could create another event for white people where black people could attend, but they weren't allowed to speak.
One of the most interesting things about this attempt to section off people according to group characteristics, first of all, is that it makes a claim which is self-contradictory on its own terms. It says simultaneously, a group of people cannot understand another group of people because they have not had the same lived experience. And it simultaneously says, but you must devote your life to trying to do so.
Right.
It's what I've described as the "you must understand me, you will never understand me" conundrum. But the moral evil, it seems to me, underneath it is that if I cannot understand somebody who's black, and somebody who's Asian cannot understand me, and I can't understand a straight person, and a straight person can't understand me, and none of us who are male can understand women, and so on, then it's unclear how we should aspire to communicate in our lives.
Yeah.
And it's unclear why we would bother to read or talk or think across lines. It says we must be stuck in our silo. I must only read gay, white, male literature, because although I could try to read literature by other people, it's really not worth it because I'll never understand it. That suggests that we as human beings can never get beyond whatever trait we're born with. It's profoundly anti-human.
And we know that that's false for a number of reasons. For example, you're gay and I'm straight, but we both know what love is. We both feel love.
So, and I think there's nothing that either of us cannot understand about the other or their point of view.
Right.
I don't think there's anything you could say that I would say, I can't wrap my head around that because I'm gay.
Right.
And I don't think there's anything I would say that you would say, I just can't understand what Douglas is talking about, but it must be because I'm straight. It's such, on its own terms, a ludicrous and
poisonous. It poisons interactions. But we also know that that's false because we do it all the time. We construct institutions. We go to the bank and make change.
Yeah.
We put in our order for lunch today.
Yes.
We don't know the gender or the sexual orientation of the person who took our lunch. So we certainly do it with commerce, but we do it with commerce in the broadest sense when we create systems to do these things.
Yes. And it also, of course, it among other things, makes us retreat into the following problem, which is that if we can't understand each other, it's unclear how we could sort out any problems.
Right.
Other than through violence.
Right.
Because either we can communicate successfully with each other as human beings, or communication is in some way impossible because understanding is impossible, and then what do we have other than violence? Right. Now, the thing that they claim to be wanting to avert is precisely the thing that they're most likely to encourage.
Right. And when you think about that, well, what if someone is gay and black? Well, then Right. So there are ever divisions in which you can only communicate more narrowly with people
And
who share. Yeah.
yes, and all of these things, because as you know, the intersectionalists are fascinated by this, aren't they?
Right.
They think there's nothing so interesting as finding interlocking oppressions and so on. And this in the identity politics and intersectionalist game is almost the heart of the game, because of the assertion that is made that all oppression in human existence is interweaved. That it is all interlocked, and that if you were to address one form of oppression, you would have to address the others. So the intersectionalists say it's not good enough to address remaining misogyny in society without addressing remaining misogyny in relation to black women in society. And then it's not sufficient to address remaining misogyny against black women in society. You must fixate on black trans women in society, and on and on and on. Some of which is interesting, and some of which, but it's a long way away from solving any problems, because among much else, it says this is so completely interlocked that to unweave it, to unlock it, you would solve something. And my suggestion is you can't, because all of these things are more complex even on those terms. For instance, what do you do with somebody who has some of those characteristics but ducks out from another aspect of it? What do you do about a black woman for whom their femininity is very important to them, but they don't have any interest in black issues? Or they identify as a black person, they'd rather not be reduced to being, a woman. And on and on and on along this way you go. And it seems to me that it's obvious that the intersections don't all resolve and find resolution. They madden people because there are all these tensions which are going to exist anyway.
Imagine taking that upon yourself and thinking that if you think this way, you are a better person. That, to me, is what is particularly maddening. It's the move from thinking about something to feeling it makes you a better person if you have this worldview. If you're constantly looking at people. So when you walk into a store and there's a mixed-race couple, that has to command a certain percentage of your attention.
To steel man what they think they're doing, they think that they're correcting injustices that have existed in the past by overcorrecting in the present.
Right.
So they think that because it's undoubtedly true that women have not always historically been able to achieve what they should have been able to achieve by dint of being a woman, because homosexuality was criminalized until the 60s, because this country in America, like many other countries in the world, had terrible racial problems throughout a significant portion of its history, which were not resolved until, I'd argue, the latter part of the 20th century, and some people think still not. But it suggests that because of that historic injustice, it must be rectified now by doing it the other way round, at least for a period of time.
That's equity.
Equity. So because women undoubtedly didn't always have the opportunities they should have had, we'll make up for it by insulting men now.
Right.
You can do the same thing on the LGBT bit, but the most obvious one, the most really rancid and divisive one now, is black people undoubtedly had oppression in the past, so we'll make white people feel like the bad ones. And I think they think, this is steel manning and attributing good motive to it, I think they think they'll only need to do it for a time. The problem is,
the work is never done.
the work is never done. They don't know when they'd stop.
Right.
They don't know who would call time. And the crucial thing is, they don't know when the overcorrection doesn't end up swinging the other way. Like, the question I always wonder on about this is it wise for the portion of feminist studies that decided that the best way to advance women is to insult men? Do they think long-term it's a good strategy to try to demoralize 50% of the population? It seemed to me unwise and a hard way to get support long-term.
If the goal is to reach some kind of a consensus.
If it's to reach a consensus. And the same, obviously, with racial issues. If you agree that because black people in history have been disadvantaged, is it wise, particularly in a country like America where the black population is, 13% of the population, is it wise to talk about the group that is the majority group still, white people, as if they are guilty beings who carry historic sin and can never be redeemed? It seems to me that if that is the plan in the overcorrection, I can see quite a lot of ways in which that goes wrong.
Right.
When I first started looking at identity politics, intersectionalism, and all that sort of thing, I knew that I should try to engage with the fundamental texts. What were the foundational texts? And one of the ones I heard about a lot, it's one of the most cited texts, is Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack.
Yeah.
And I thought when I got this text, I thought, well, there must be something there. It'll be something to contend with. And no, it's a few pages of assertions made by this academic, many of which are erroneous, many of which are false, provably so. And yet this is one of the most cited texts, as if what it says is true. And the problem with that is you set up then this hierarchy fight. And the hierarchy fight involves people having to try to work out where they stand in a privilege structure.
Right.
All of which is unsolvable because nobody can do it with one person throughout their life. Nobody can do it with everybody from one class of person throughout their life because people don't fall out like that and aren't able to be summed up like that. And you couldn't even do it hour by hour because it could change. I mean, you could have somebody who appeared to be at the very top of the hierarchy privilege pyramid who turned out, for instance, to have very serious mental problems. And you didn't know that at 12 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock you find it out, and therefore you've got to move them around in the hierarchy of oppression. Nobody worked this out because it can't be worked out.
What a weight. Like, seriously, what a weight to place upon someone as they walk through life to try to figure out what the oppression hierarchy is or the privilege hierarchy.
Yes.
I mean, just imagine, like, you're trying to navigate your life anyway, and then you superimpose on top of that an additional structure of grievance.
Yes, which also, and grievance is obviously the key word here, isn't it? Because to teach somebody that they should feel grievance is, in my view, a quite wicked thing to do.
Right.
Because we all, in our lives, could have grievances. I mean, most of us do have some grievances, and it's not always been seen as a good thing to have.
Right.
It thwarts you in lots of ways.
Right.
So to be encouraged to have grievances is to set somebody off from the beginning of their life in a direction which is highly likely to lead them to unhappiness. I mean, I would say that although there are legitimate grievances that people have, they should also be encouraged to try to reconcile themselves with the world, to harmonize themselves with the world, to recognize the things you can do things about and the things that you can't.
The serenity prayer.
Yes, absolutely. And this, the reason why that particular bit of wisdom goes across all world traditions is because it's a fundamental insight that, in the same way as we know that if we see somebody on an average day and they ask how we are, we tend to say, great or fine. We don't say, actually, my bowels are playing up today and I've got
That's fortunate.
verruca's back and so on.
Right.
Because not just because they may not want to know the detail, but because we intuit that to do so in some way would make their day worse. It would not only be a selfish thing to do, it would be to spread around grievance in a world which already has a lot of unhappiness and which you don't need to add to. And this is one of the fundamental things, it seems to me, that's so wicked about this project, to encourage people to be more at odds with the world than we all already are. It's a fundamental moral error.